Hey everyone, welcome to another installment of Harry Potter Theory. The first thing that I want to get out of the way here is that I did actually enjoy the trailer. I don't know what I expected, but it exceeded those expectations, so I just want to make it clear that these are objective criticisms. I've already done a breakdown video as well as a video full of some fun Easter eggs, so make sure to check those out if you haven't already. Alright, on to the things that were wrong. Before we go any further, I do feel the need to clarify what wrong actually means, because not everything that's different from the books is automatically wrong. There are a few different ways something can fall into this category. First, you have direct contradictions, things that are described a certain way in the books and the show does completely different. Then we've got missing details, smaller things that are clearly established in the books but just don't show up, at least from what we can tell. And finally we have additions, things that were never in the books at all that the show has decided to introduce. Now again, none of this necessarily ruins anything. Some of these changes might even end up being improvements. But if they're going to advertise as book accurate, we might as well hold them accountable by pointing out a couple of shortcomings. Again, on the whole I think they did a good job, but these are the things that stood out to me. Starting with Harry's eyes. This is probably the most obvious one, and also one of the most important. In the books, Harry's eyes are described as green, not just once, but constantly. It's one of his most defining physical traits, and more importantly, it directly ties him to his mother. We hear it over and over again. You have your mother's eyes. As a matter of fact, Harry's eyes are mentioned a whopping 20 times across all of the books, with 9 of these instances directly comparing them to his mother. This list includes the likes of Hagrid, Ollivander, Dumbledore, Mrs. Weasley, Rita Skeeter, Elphias Doge, Slughorn, and more. Slughorn even brings it up multiple times. You look a lot like your dad, but you've got your mum's eyes. You have your mother's eyes. She was in here herself, buying her first wand. You do look extraordinarily like James, except for your eyes. You have your mother's eyes, and you've got her eyes. And what makes this significant is that even J.K. Rowling herself has confirmed that this detail is crucial to the story. The only really important thing is that his eyes look like his mother's eyes. One of the main criticisms from the original films was that not only did Harry have the wrong eye colour, but that they also didn't bother to match his eyes to Lily. I will say that in the trailer it's a bit unclear, but from what I can tell, his eyes appear blue, maybe leaning slightly toward a blue-green or teal depending on the lighting. There are a few close-up shots, but it's still difficult to tell. Either way, they definitely don't look like the bright, distinct green that's described in the books. Harry had a thin face, knobbly knees, black hair, and bright green eyes. In the original film series, they did try to give Daniel Radcliffe green contact lenses, but he had a reaction to them, so they scrapped it. Rowling was okay with this as long as his eyes still matched his mother's, but then somehow the films managed to mess that up too. Back to the trailer for a second, this felt like a perfect opportunity to get this one right. However, and I could still be wrong, it looks like his eyes are still blue. And if we're being strict about accuracy, especially for something that's referenced 20 times across the books, you'd expect this one to be correct. However, they do still have an opportunity to improve this over the original films, as long as they match his eye colour to Lily. House robes. When reflecting on the Harry Potter series, I'd imagine that most people picture their favourite characters decked out in their house colours. Harry in Gryffindor's signature red and gold, and Draco in Slytherin's signature green and silver. But what many fans may have forgotten is that this is a movieism. In the books, Hogwarts students just wore plain black robes with no house-specific markings. First-year students will require 3 sets of plain work robes, black. The coloured ties and house-themed accessories seen in the movies were added for visual distinction, and are in fact not based on book canon. In the trailer, there are a couple of shots of Harry and co walking through Hogwarts, and while admittedly a bit less colourful than their movie counterparts, they're immediately identifiable as Gryffindor students through the colours they're wearing. There are actually moments in the books that support the whole no-colour thing. For example, in Chamber of Secrets, when Harry and Ron are disguised as Crabbe and Goyle using Polyjuice Potion, they ask Penelope Clearwater where the Slytherin common room is. If students were clearly colour-coded by house the way they are in the films, then they would have known that she wasn't in Slytherin. The Slytherins always come up to breakfast from over there, said Ron, nodding at the entrance to the dungeons. The words had barely left his mouth when a girl with long curly hair emerged from the entrance. "Excuse me," said Ron, hurrying up to her. "We've forgotten the way to our common room." "I beg your pardon," said the girl stiffly. "Our common room? I'm a Ravenclaw." To be completely fair, there is a bit of room for interpretation here. While the Hogwarts supply list does mention plain black work robes, it doesn't explicitly mention things like shirts, ties, or trousers, so you could argue that it's either implied, given that uniforms are standard in UK schools, or that students are simply wearing normal clothes underneath their robes. In fact, some of the original illustrations and early merchandise actually show the trio wearing pretty standard clothing under their robes, which supports that idea. The only exception to all of this is Quidditch, where both players and supporters wear their house colours. But outside of Quidditch, everyone's just wearing the same plain black robes. Either way, the very distinct colour-coded house uniform look that we all associate with Harry Potter today, that's something the films really popularised, and it looks like the new series is following suit. Next up, we've got one of the largest, no pun intended, mistakes. Vernon isn't fat. Right at the very beginning of the trailer, there's one detail that immediately stands out. Vernon isn't fat. And this one really stuck out to me because Vernon is very clearly described in the books. Mr. Dursley was the director of a firm called Grunnings, which made drills. He was a big, beefy man with hardly any neck, although he did have a very large moustache. The moustache bristled. Uncle Vernon screwed up his enormous face as though trying to remember something very unpleasant. Harry sat down between Dudley and Uncle Vernon, a large, beefy man with very little neck and a lot of moustache. Aunt Petunia's thin, horsey face now appeared beside Uncle Vernon's wide, purple one. While the book descriptions may admittedly lean more toward his beefiness and describe his face more than anything else, the implication is pretty clear that he's large, and it probably isn't all muscle. His physical presence is also an integral part of his character, as he's meant to feel overbearing and physically imposing. I will also admit that movie Vernon was probably a step too far. There's no explicit mention of him being quite that size, just that he was large, wide, and beefy. But in the trailer, that's still not what we're seeing. Daniel Rigby, who plays Vernon in the new show, looks relatively average in build. Definitely not the bulky, thick-set Vernon described in the books. And that does take away from the character a bit, because that larger-than-life presence is part of what makes Vernon, well, Vernon. It does seem like they're trying to compensate for this in subtle ways. The tightly buttoned collar, for example, seems designed to recreate that no-neck look by visually compressing the area. They also nailed a couple of the essentials, most importantly, that thick, old-fashioned moustache of his. And one thing they've added is the glasses, which Vernon never wore in the books. I'm guessing they threw them in to really cement that 90s vibe. Harry's scar. I already touched on this one in previous videos, so I'll get straight to the point. For the most part, Harry actually looks great in the trailer. The casting feels natural, and visually, he already fits the role really well. But there is one tiny detail that stood out to me almost immediately, and that's the placement of his famous scar. In the books, Harry's lightning bolt scar is positioned closer to the center of his forehead, but in the trailer, it once again looks slightly shifted off to the side, just like it was in the original films. It isn't wildly off, but it is noticeable. And yes, it's very minor, but it's also one of the easiest details to get right. Hagrid and Harry's encounter. There's a moment in the trailer where Hagrid is talking to Harry on the train into London, explaining who his parents were, what they were like, all that good stuff. But in the books, that conversation happens much earlier, while Harry is still with the Dursleys, right when he first learns the truth about himself. Now, your mum and dad were as good a witch and wizard as I ever knew. Head boy and girl at Hogwarts in their day. Suppose the mystery is why you-know-who never tried to get them on his side before. Probably knew they were too close to Dumbledore to want anything to do with the dark side. Maybe he thought he could persuade them. Maybe he just wanted them out of the way. All anyone knows is, he turned up in the village where all of you were living on Halloween 10 years ago. You were just a year old. He came to your house and... This moment is meant to be completely overwhelming and completely flip Harry's world upside down. So by moving that conversation to the train, it looks like they've restructured that reveal, spreading it out instead of delivering it in one big moment. I'm sure they still talk about his parents at the big "you're a wizard" reveal, maybe just not exactly like they do in the books. Not a massive issue, but a definite change from the book. Ollivanders. Another small detail I noticed is a line from Garrick Ollivander that seems to be taken directly from the films, not the books. In the trailer, Ollivander delivers that iconic line about Harry's wand. I think we can expect great things from you. The thing is, that exact phrasing and the way it's delivered is the same as John Hurt's line from the original Philosopher's Stone movie, and not what's actually written in the book. It's pretty close, but not quite there. And what this suggests to me is that even though HBO is aiming for a more faithful adaptation, they're still borrowing certain iconic moments from the movies when they work. And honestly, this is one of those cases where it makes sense, because that line has become so recognizable that changing it might actually feel wrong. Color coding. Okay, this is a bit of a weird one, but hear me out. If you've watched the original Harry Potter films, then you'll know that one of the most defining visual choices across the series is how it gets gradually darker over time. Philosopher's Stone is warm, bright, almost magical in the most literal sense. There's a golden glow to everything, and Hogwarts feels cozy, even safe. But as the story progresses, that look slowly fades. By the time we reach Half-Blood Prince and Deathly Hallows, the colour palette is almost completely drained. Everything feels cold, grey and heavy, which makes sense because the story itself has become much darker. But from the looks of it, at least from what I can tell, the new HBO trailer doesn't really follow that same trajectory. Yes, this is a movieism, and technically not wrong in the canon sense, but it is something that I felt was significant enough to mention. Even though this is the trailer for Philosopher's Stone, the very beginning of the story, the tone already feels noticeably darker. The lighting is more muted, the colours are less saturated, and the overall atmosphere feels a bit serious. This isn't necessarily a bad thing, and could just be a different creative direction, but I do wonder if the series will start here and gradually plunge even darker, or if this is more or less the baseline we're going to get moving forward. I really liked that aspect of the original films, and wonder which direction they'll go. And that about sums up today's video. If you want more updates on the Harry Potter series, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also make sure to check out my breakdown and Easter egg videos if you haven't already. Links in the pinned comment. Until next time, remember, it does not do to dwell on dreams and forget to live.